Hey, hi. I'm Lindsay and you're with Art with Lindsay. And today you're gonna paint this with me. It's an adorable summer little meadow. And the supplies that we're gonna use, I'm gonna do a 16 by 20 canvas. This is sort of an older canvas that I just had laying around in my truck for a while. It's gonna work. If you're following along with me in painting, I would suggest maybe on a piece of paper because I'm gonna go sort of quickly. I'm gonna use a large brush and a small brush. So the big brush, it's huge because I gotta cover all of this canvas. And then the small brush is for little detail-y stuff. And then you can always throw in anything in between that you think you might want. The colors that I'm using today, these are acrylic paints. I've got black and white, red, yellow, and blue. So we've got our primary colors in black and white. I don't like to go too crazy with a bunch of different colors because I can make pretty much anything with these. So that's what I'm gonna use. I've also got an extra palette. The palette's gonna help me mix colors because we're gonna do that not right out of the gate, but pretty soon. I've got a water cup. This water cup is gonna be for washing brushes. And then generally once I have paint on my brush, I'm gonna keep it in that water cup so that my paint doesn't dry out too much. I am using acrylic paint, so the acrylic paint is gonna dry within about 2-ish minutes. So if it gets somewhere you don't want, go ahead and clean it up as quickly as you can, and it'll be really easy as long as it's not dry yet. I'm also going to use a good amount of either paper towels, or if you don't have those, I've got just a rag that's got a whole bunch of stuff already on it. So this is what I kind of use to dry my brush off after I've dipped it in my water. All right, also I've got a drink. So if you don't have a drink ready, now's the time. Go get it, come back. I'll wait. Okay, I'm not gonna wait any longer. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to start from the very back and work our way forward. And if we look at our painting here, we've got a whole lot of sky here. It's really pretty. It's got a gradient. So it's going to start from white and go up to blue. So what I'm going to do is start with white and give myself a horizon line. If you don't know what a horizon line is, it's where the sky and the ground meet. So I'm going to start with white and then I'll just sort of drift up. I'm going to take my big brush. I've got a good amount of white paint here. And then if I don't know exactly where I want to start, I like to use measurements. It makes me feel better. I'm going to use my hand. If you take a look at my hand, it's large. It's a large hand. So if you've got a dainty little hand, I'm going to say from one hand length down. I'm going to make a line right here, and I'm just going to start painting upward. Again, I'm going to move kind of quick. I have what I'm going to call a generous amount of paint. And as I get up to the top here, I'm going to let the white just drift away so that when I put blue on, it's going to be heavier at top and then it'll drift down to a nice white, light blue color at the bottom. So I've got my big brush. I'm going to take just a little bit of blue to start with, and then I'll kind of add as I want to. So I've got a dirty brush. I'm going to go into blue, just a little edge here, and I'm going to do what I call the dirty dip. So from the top, I'm going to make these long vertical strokes. I should have a little more paint on my brush here. And a little bit of water is going to help me push that around so much better. So I'm going to work through. I don't want it to be super duper blended because one solid color is kind of boring. So as I go down, I want it to just not be a flat white. Let's see. A little bit more here and I'm going to call it good because I can have a whole lot of fun blending colors. But if I just keep going over it, it's going to look like one flat color and that's not very interesting. Let's see, a little bit of white for that spot that I took a big blue strip into. There we go. All right, so I'm going to call this guy done for just right this second. I'm going to rinse out my brush and we're going to talk about the meadow. So when I've got a whole lot of paint on my brush, here's my trick to mix it out really well. I'm going to smash my brush to the bottom of the cup and I'm going to scrub it around like I'm trying to clean the bottom of that cup. And then I'll always wipe on those edges and hit my paper towel, or in my case, a rag. I've got my extra plate here. So with this, I'm going to use it as a mixing palette. I've got a whole lot of yellow. I'm going to use a bunch of white for now and a little bit of yellow. So everybody's brush sizes are going to be a little different. So my brush is huge. I went in and got as much white as I could muster here. And I went in and got a little bit more. And then I've got a little bit of yellow. So as I mix that in, all I'm looking for is something that's not white, but it's not the yellow right out of our pile there. And as I'm making it, I want to make sure that I've got enough to go all the way down the canvas. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to get a good amount of the colors that I need. So again, it's a whole bunch of white. I took less yellow. I've already ran out of yellow paint, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself some more. Here we go. That's more the color I was looking for. All right. So now when I do this color, I'm going to start on the horizon line and then work my way down to the bottom. Again, I don't want it to be the exact same color. So as I'm working down, I'm going to grab just a little bit of white too. So I've already got some white here that's a little dirty. I'm going into it. And then I'm going to let that sort of blend in. If you can't see it really well, that's okay. When your paint dries, it's going to be a little bit darker than what you see as you're painting it on here. So it'll probably pull out those contrast parts a little bit better later. And then again, this is just going to be a nice little base coat. So when we put in our nice little meadow and hills and stuff, it'll look a lot better. So I'm going to go down. I don't want to go all the way down. So I'm going to kind of eyeball right around 4-ish fingers. And I'm just going to keep painting. I'm going kind of quick because this part matters a lot less than some of those other parts. And also for the sake of keeping this video kind of low here. So I'm going to get down to the bottom. And like I said, I don't want it to be one solid color. This keeps drifting. So now with my dirty brush, I'm going to go in and get some solid, just regular yellow out of my pile here. And I'm going to finish up this whole section. Because what we're going to do next is make a green, but we're going to do a fun thing called blending on canvas. I've got my whole canvas covered. First thing we did is made our sky. We started with white and did a little bit of blue. Then we mixed a nice light yellow color and started filling that up. I don't want it to be a solid color, so I went back in and I did a little bit of that straight yellow and sort of struck that through, whatever you call it. And now, here's the fun part. The bottom section of this has got a little bit of green right here, but it's kind of dark and then it fades away. So what I want to do is that dirty dip thing again. But when I do that dirty dip, I'm going to take my dirty brush. It's got yellow and white on it already. I'm going to do just the tip right into my blue here. So now I'm going to start on the blue or on the bottom side, and I'm going to start sort of mixing it into here. I don't want it to go too far up, so I'm going to make sure it doesn't go more than 4-ish, 5 fingers from the bottom up. And as I'm doing it, I'm going to start on the very bottom here because that's where it's going to be the darkest. And I want to do these little X shapes. So I'm doing little X's, just haphazardly. I'm going to start off by pushing down kind of hard to get the paint on there. And then as I go up, I'm going to push a lot lighter. So I'm mostly just sort of nicking that canvas. And that's going to give me a nice blend. All right. So once I start to get the colors that I like, I'm going to do what I call the artist lean. So the artist lean is when you lean back, take a good look at the whole thing compositionally and see if it's how you like it. I have a sky. It's a little bit lighter at my horizon line. And then it comes down to this nice sort of messy green bluey color, which I like a lot. So I'm okay with it now. I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I, again, could keep mixing all day and be just happy with myself. So I'm going to do this. I don't want to do this thing called noodling. Noodling is when you're done working and you just work for the sake of having a whole lot of fun pushing paint around. So you can keep doing that if you want to, but then your entire meadow is going to be a light green color, which isn't wrong. It's just not what I'm going for here. So I'm going to keep with my big brush, but I'm going to rinse it out really well. So I'm going to scrub it down at the bottom, and I'm going to give little taps on the side here. I've still got a whole bunch of paint. There we go. And I'm dabbing my paper towel, or in my case, a rag. So the next thing that I want to do, we're going to talk about clouds. There's a lot of ways to do a lot of different clouds. I've got sort of these nice big fluffy clouds. And then my trick for that is gonna be clouds are really fluffy right on top, and then they're a little more straight right on the bottom there. So I'm gonna take my small brush and just straight white paint. Your background's not gonna be totally dry, so let it mix in and be all sorts of different colors because that's what's most interesting. I've got some clean white right here in the middle. So I've got my small brush and some clean white. I'm gonna do my artist lean, decide where I want my clouds to be, and I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna start from the middle and make a big old circle and kind of scribble, go up and down, give myself just uneven tops and let it fade away. It might take a couple of layers. I even got a little bit of yellow into it, which I'm pretty okay with. It kind of looks like bounce light from our meadow. And again, the amount of weight you put on your brush is gonna give you different textures. So if you push really hard and do those circles, it's gonna blend into that background really well, which is a nice way to sort of get the shape that you want. And then when you're ready to do some highlights, I'm gonna take a really globby white paint and sort of swish through here in nice rounded strokes. I want to do more than one cloud, so I'm going to do one more down over here because I really like the one that's over there. This one's a little longer than it is tall. There we go. And then to do some highlights, I've got a good glob of paint, and I'm just going to do nice light little swooshes. All right. So when I'm doing these, I usually do paint parties with a whole lot of people, so I've got a little more jokes to bounce off of. But one of my jokes is I do Bob Rossisms, and one of those is to no mistakes, just happy accidents. So if something happens like the yellow that got in there, I really like it. It gives it sort of a warm, cloudy feel. I'm gonna throw my brush in the water, give it a good rinse, because we're gonna actually make our green color now, so that we can do our trees and brush or whatever we've got back here in our horizon line, just to give us something extra to look at. This time I'm gonna mix the color first, so when I do that, I wanna do a whole lot of yellow, a little bit of white, and then just a touch of blue. So I'm going in, got a whole lot of yellow. I'm gonna scrape it off on my plate here. A bunch of white, just right on itself. And then a little tiny bit of blue here, and I'm gonna mix that in. It looks pretty nice. I want it to definitely look like it's a little more in the background and it's trees, not grass, so I'm gonna throw a little more blue in here. So I've got this nice, I'm gonna say medium green color. I'm going with it. I could sit here and mix all day, but I don't want to noodle on my palette. So I've got my small brush. I'm gonna come over to my horizon line and decide on what sort of shapes I wanna have here. I've got a couple of fluffy trees, and then I've got what I'm gonna call little evergreen trees coming out. So I'm gonna start on the horizon line, and this time I'm gonna hold my brush a little farther back, and then I'm gonna do this little tapping. So right on the edge, I'm gonna start over on my right edge because that's where it's gonna be a little higher. So if I'm gonna mess up, I'd rather do it right there. I'm gonna try to keep it right on top of my yellow line up here, but if it drifts down below, it's okay. So as I'm going through, I'm doing little circles. I want it to be uneven. If you're OCD, please don't make a pattern. You're gonna have to fight it. Take a deep breath. And I'm just gonna sort of trickle away. Oh, but that one's like a pattern. There we go. And I'm gonna drift off to nothing over there. So I've got my green color. I'm doing lots of little taps. I don't want to see the sky between where my trees end here and my meadow starts. So I want to make sure it goes down just a little bit more right there. And then I'm going to do some evergreen trees. When I do that, I'm going to, instead of tapping this way, I'm going to sort of turn my brush on its edge. I'll start over here, and then I'm going to use just the edge of that brush and do little taps. I'm going to start out really light. And as I work my way down, I'm going to push a little harder until it works into there. I don't want to do too many, and I don't want them to be the exact amount apart. So I'm going to go over, I'm starting out really light, and I'm going to push down a little more so I get that nice tapered look. One more right over here, just a little guy. So I have shape. I have the trees, different kinds of trees. It looks a whole lot of fun, but it looks kind of flat. So I want to put in a little bit of shading. The way I'm going to do that is a little bit of blue. So I've got my dirty brush. Again, it's another dirty dip trick. I'm going to get just a little bit of blue on the end, and I'm going to tap right along this bottom edge. When I do, I want to go up in some places. I'll move over so it's kind of flatter in others. Bring it around, just so that it's not one solid color. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but with a little tiny bit of yellow. So I've got my dirty brush again. I'm going to go in and get a nice good scoop of yellow, just a little blob here. And I'm going to start tapping down one side of it. So I'm going to decide on my left side. That's going to be where my light direction is coming from. And I'm just giving lots of little taps. I didn't do every tree or what I'm calling a tree, little shapes here, just to give it a little bit of extra interest. Because as you can see, it looks like just a lot of blobs, but once you kind of stand farther back, it'll look like trees once we get a little more stuff going on in here. If you went too far down, you can take your finger and just sort of wipe across. And it'll give you a little bit of fuzz, but we're gonna mess with that later. We'll go over the highlight. We'll go over the horizontal horizon line with some highlight. Sorry. Before we do that, we've got a lot of almost solid color, and I'm gonna break that up. When we go into our meadow, we've got a lot of these little sort of mountainy pasture hills. And I don't wanna start with the white because that's where I want it to be a little more strategically put on. So we're gonna start with our big brush. I wanna make sure it's nice and rinsed out. And I'm gonna use straight yellow paint. And when I do this, I'm gonna start out and do just quick taps with the edge of my brush. And as I get down to the bottom, I'm gonna do a little bit heavier taps. And what that'll do is give us a little bit of perspective. Farther back, you can't see a whole lot what's going on, so it doesn't matter as much. And then when we get close up, I want it to be a little bit heavier, a little bit more pressure as I'm going down. So I've got a nice light hand. I have no method to this madness. I'm just going through. I'm gonna zigzag back and forth. I've got a nice light hand up here. And then as I start to move down, I'm gonna push down a little bit harder so that I've got these nice big areas. This is gonna give me not only a little bit of contrast and tell me where I'm gonna go with my lighter color, but it's also gonna give me a little bit of shading along with it. So now I'm down here, I'm pushing down pretty hard. You can see my canvas jagging. All right, and I'm gonna call that good. So now I've got lots of little splotches of this solid yellow color. We're gonna move into our white and give us just top of mounds. So just think about where the light is hitting. It's not gonna hit the whole canvas. And I just wanna get the tip of my brush with white paint. If a little bit of yellow's in there, that's okay. And when I do this, again, right at the top, I'm gonna kind of make these little wavy back and forth, but I'm gonna touch very lightly in just the corner of my brush. So I wanna go right up on the edge here. I don't want it to be super duper straight because it's got little mounds of grass and stuff. And then as I go over to my trees, you can see that that green is starting to tap in. It's gonna give us an extra layer of background. So if you get too much green, here's how I'm gonna change that. So I've got a little bit too much green on my brush. I'm not gonna clean it out. I'm just gonna wipe it off and go back into my white. And then when I tap over it, I'm gonna tap a lot lighter so I'm not pulling that bottom paint off. And I just wanna move myself down, give myself these little mounds. Trying not to think about where they go, I'm just moving my hand around. And then what I'll do is a nice artist lean and decide where else it needs to go. I'm gonna put a few more off to the side there because it looks like it drops off. And I always like to have a little bit of something going right off the edge of your canvas there. The world doesn't end right there. It goes off in that direction. Same thing on this side over here. All right. So I'm gonna do a few more little dabbies, and then we'll talk about these little bits of blossom. There we go. Break it up a little bit there. So after I've taken a nice kind of lean back, I'm happy with my clouds. I might add one more cloud right up here. Maybe because I see it over there, I feel like it needs to be here. I've got a nice little kind of brush tree line in the back. And now I've got a base of where my little blossoms are gonna go. And I'm calling these little dabs here blossoms. So what I wanna point out is that we do have this little bit of green that's coming through out here. I really like that coming through. So I'm gonna take my big brush again. I have a little bit of my green paint left, but if you don't, it was a whole bunch of yellow, a little bit of white, and a tiny bit of blue. I've got just a small amount. And I'm gonna do the same tap, but I'm not gonna push down nearly as hard as I did on any of those other colors. I'm gonna pick a couple of spots here and just graze my brush through. I'm tapping, but I'm kind of giving myself a up and down. I'm gonna go to my right. I might zig it back over to the left here. Just to give some action coming through. Your eye is gonna drift around. And I don't want it to be just solid yellow here. So I'm gonna do a little bit more right over here and off the edge over here. Looks pretty okay to me. I'm gonna start doing blossoms. So blossoms are just gonna be quick little dashes with my big brush. And I might use the flat end, which is what I call my pasta side. Or I might use the thin side. So when I tap on that thin side, it'll be what I call my morning side. Let me show you what it looks like on a plate. So the after pasta side, it's a nice thick line. So when I do my blossoms, I'll do little dashes going down like that, and either real short ones or real big ones, or the morning side, which is the edge of your brush there. And then I would do quick little dashes. I need more paint. Quick little dashes with that, just to give it little bits there. So I've got a clean big brush. I'm gonna sort of go between my fat side and my thin side. If you wanna try somewhere that doesn't matter, try somewhere in the middle because it's yellow, it's gonna blend in pretty well. And then as I'm going through, I wanna sort of tilt my brush back and forth so that it's not going all in one direction. So I've got my big brush, a good amount of yellow, and now I'm gonna kind of bring it down just a little into what I'm gonna call now my grassy area in here. I don't want it to go all the way across, so I'm just gonna sort of plot out where I wanna have some of these little peaks and valleys go up over there. So now you can see it comes down a little harder here, over here, and right there. If you don't like it, just take a little bit of water and sort of brush over it and start again. The cool thing about acrylic is it dries pretty quickly. And we're using a lot of the same colors, so you can kind of just blend it back in and try again. I think I'm okay with the yellow. I want to do one lap through with this kind of blossom technique with that lighter yellow that we started with way up at our horizon line. So I still have a bunch of that left over, just a lighter yellow color. If you don't, it's a good amount of white with a little bit of yellow, and then just keep adding yellow till you like that color. When I do this, I'm putting wet paint on top of wet paint, and I don't want it to mix in all the way, so I have this thing that I call the one and done. So you're gonna lay down a stroke and never touch it again. And if you're OCD, that's really hard. So take a deep breath, maybe step back, come back into it. So I've got a couple of bigger blossoms, a few little small blossoms. I wanna go in different directions here. And I'm gonna bring it up just a little bit. Shorter as I get up to that top section. And then up here, you wouldn't be able to see a whole lot of that, so I'm not gonna worry about this middle section, putting blossoms there. I'm gonna do a lean back, see how I like it. I think I wanna do a few more of these lighter yellows. Just give it a little more of this contrasty color. Yeah, it's pretty okay to me. I'm gonna do two more sets of blossoms. So I want to do white next, and white I really need a nice clean brush for, so I'm going to scrub my brush out. I'm always going to dab on my rag. I'm even going to give it a squeeze so I don't have too much water on my brush. A lot of water will hide right up by your bristles and your metal, so give that a little squeeze right there. All right, my white paint's dirty, so I'm going to give myself a little more white paint. I always like to put it off to the side just in case I want to end up mixing with it later. So I've got my white. I'm going to do a generous amount right on the edge here. And I'm going to do these a little more strategic because they're really bright and there's going to be a whole lot of contrast to that. So let's start maybe here and move around. It's starting to get dirty, so I'm just going to wipe it on my rag here. Grab some more paint. Go right into it. Every 5 or 6 little blossoms, I'm going to take a step back and give it a little gander. If you want to feel a little extra pretentious, you can close one eye, put your paintbrush up, and give it another gander. I'm going to do a little more here to make me feel good about myself. And that looks pretty okay. So there's a couple of more things to do. We've got these red blossoms, which are a lot of contrast, and what's cool is if it mixes into the yellow too much, it's not a big deal because it's just going to make more orange, which is kind of just a different blossom. I do want to start with a nice clean and dry brush, so I'm going to throw my big brush down and give it a nice scrub here. I'm drying it out up by the metal, and I'm just going to go into straight red. Give myself a generous amount over here. Same situation, I'm going to do a lot less of these than I did any of those other colors though. So I'm going to step back, really feel pretentious and artistly, and just sort of give yourself a few swaps there. Let's see, I'm going to do a little guy here. Moving on up, I don't want him to be so harsh. Before I start to noodle, I want to go up to the top. Once I start getting up more than maybe a hand's width, I'm going to start just doing a little tap with just the edge of my brush, just like we did with these ones. I'm just going to put in little patches of where these blossoms would be showing through. Take one right off the edge there. All right, what do you think? I think I need a few more. Just over here. I knew you were calling me out. I could tell. All right. So the one last thing all of our paintings always need is a signature. There's a lot of ways to do it. I have 2 ways to sign, 2 different ways to sign, and then I'll tell you how you can cheat. So the first way to sign your work, I am going to use my small brush, go figure. And then I like to pick the color I want to sign with. I'm going to do blue today because it's right here. And I'm going to take a little bit of water, a couple of drops of water, and really mix that water into your paint. And what'll happen is I can make a more fluid stroke without having to reload my brush a bunch of times. And I'm going to show you on a plate because I feel like it'll be a lot easier to see. So with a light hand and watered down paint, I'll go through and I just like to do my initials. You can see you get a nice little glide there. If you don't, and you just go in with a regular paint, it's going to look real good for 2 seconds and then drift away. Second way to do this, I'm going to use the back end of my brush. So the little wood bit is helpful. If you do this, you'll pick your color, get a nice glob of paint or a bead of paint on the end here, and I'm not actually going to touch the canvas with the wood bit. I'm going to drag my little paint bead across. So it gives you a more defined line. It just takes a lot longer and I don't have the patience for this. So you get the gist. I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to wipe my paintbrush off, otherwise I'll start touching my face with it and I'll have little red dots everywhere and everybody was asking me what's going on. So you can sign either way. If you don't want to sign with those, you can always find a permanent marker after it's dried. And you don't have to sign the front, even though I would recommend it. You can sign the edges. If you don't want to put this in a frame, I would maybe paint those edges anyways. And then if not, you can sign the back. Here's the thing about the back. Don't sign the fabric part. We have a very light painting, and every so often, if you sign the back with the dark color, it's gonna soak through. And not only will you have your signature across your canvas, but it's also gonna be backwards. So we've done lots of gradient colors. We did lots of mixing and dabbing. I hope you had as much fun as I did. I'm gonna go ahead and drink the rest of my beer now. I'm gonna go get my dog, and we're gonna have a great day. I hope you do too. Thanks for joining me, Art with Lindsey. Thank you, Sacramento Media Center, for letting me come in and take over. I'm the only one here, and not only is it a little bit awkward looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras by myself in a room, but I've got a person just out there I can tell is eavesdropping. Thanks, John Christensen Media. He was here being my producer, which is something I've never had before. All right, tell me which one or what you like the best. Tell me what I should do next. Tell me what I should do different. I'll get my vocabulary in order. It was a great day. Thank you.